Hi, these are the most interesting historical photos that I could find. Let's go! National Guardsmen aimed their rifles outside the Kent State ROTC building engulfed in flames after it was set on fire by protesters. Firefighters were attacked with rocks while trying to put out the blaze on May 2, 1970. Olga, the headless girl, performed a sideshow illusion where mirrors and hidden body parts made her appear headless. The effect amazed audiences in the early 1900s and relied entirely on clever staging, not real injury. During a May 4, 1966 game at Yankee Stadium, Cleveland players Larry Brown and Leon Wagner were knocked unconscious in a fourth-inning collision while trying to catch a pop fly. Wagner broke his nose and Brown suffered multiple facial fractures. Jewish men were forced to scrub the streets of Vienna under Nazi supervision after the 1938 Anschluss. Guards kicked and prodded them for hours while crowds watched, and the event is now memorialized with a plaque at Hagenmüller High School. A young boy peers out the window of a bus carrying refugees from the conflict zone in Grozny. The photograph was taken in 1995 during the evacuation of civilians from the war-torn city. Frida Kahlo paints on the plaster corset she had to wear for spinal injuries, turning medical necessity into art. The photograph was taken by Juan Guzman in 1944. Ray Boom Boom Mancini delivers the final blow to Duk-Koo Kim during their 1982 fight, one of boxing's deadliest matches. Kim later died from his injuries, leading to tragic deaths of his mother and the referee. A soldier hides inside a fake tree for observation near Souchez, France, on May 15, 1918, during World War I. The disguise allowed him to watch enemy movements without being seen. Lance Corporal Job Maseko receives the military medal from Major General Theron in 1943 after destroying a German vessel with an improvised explosive while imprisoned at Tobruk. His daring act of sabotage occurred during his captivity under the Nazis. The entrance to New York City's Palladium nightclub in 1985 featured dramatic illuminated stairs. The venue closed and was demolished in 1998. Joseph Stalin wears a traditional Mongolian deal during a visit in 1936. The attire reflects diplomatic ties and cultural respect for Mongolia at the time. German Major Josef Gangl smiles in a photograph taken on May 4, 1945, just before he helped defend Castle Itter in Austria. The next day, he was killed protecting French prisoners while fighting alongside American soldiers and the Austrian resistance against SS forces. A truck carries portraits of Lenin and Stalin during a Labor Day parade in Tel Aviv, Israel, in 1949. The display reflects the influence of socialist movements in the early years of the state. Helmut Kentler, a West German psychologist and son of a former Nazi officer, orchestrated a program from the 1960s to 1990s, placing foster children with known pedophiles in West Berlin under city sponsorship. His work caused lasting harm and sparked major ethical. Finnish troops allied with Nazi Germany sit in a trench on the Leningrad front in 1942 during the siege, one of the deadliest in history. They carry rifles and wear helmets marked with skulls, prepared for combat in extreme conditions. A 4-year-old girl stands next to Lucy, an Australopithecus afarensis skeleton, one of the earliest known human ancestors. The photograph was taken in 1974 to illustrate human evolution. A Consolidated B-24J Liberator sits on the assembly line in Fort Worth in December 1944. The bomber is surrounded by factory equipment and workers during the final stages of production. Construction of the Panama Canal locks is underway, showing massive steel frameworks and tracks used for moving materials. The image captures the scale and complexity of the engineering project. U.S. Air Force soldier D. Kirkpatrick poses beside a humorous sign at Moore Field near Zamboanga City, Philippines, in 1945. The poster jokes about Japanese planes that were captured or damaged without tails, mocking the enemy and celebrating American air superiority. German police cadets pose playfully in their room in 1928, wearing helmets and shorts while standing in a line. The photograph captures a light-hearted moment during their training. A white woman sits on a bench marked Europeans Only in Johannesburg, South Africa, highlighting racial segregation under apartheid. The photograph was taken by Ernest Cole to document the system of enforced racial discrimination. A man stands next to a massive bird, reportedly photographed in 1963, claimed to be either a giant bird or pterosaur. The image is tied to the Thunderbird Mandela effect, where many remember a famous 1977 Illinois incident involving a giant bird, though historical evidence is scarce. A female dustman carries a tub full of old cans back to her dust cart in England, 1941. The photograph by Fred Ramage shows women contributing to essential wartime labor on the home front. Two women shop in a grocery store on May 5, 1976, under a banner that reads, "Happy Birthday, America. There's no place else we'd rather be." The scene captures everyday life during the country's bicentennial celebrations. In May 1976, ILM filmed the first visual effects shot for Star Wars, showing the escape pod leaving the Rebel blockade runner. The shot was chosen first because it was simpler, requiring only the model to be filmed falling. Construction of the Panama Canal began in earnest on May 4, 1904, with workers and steam machinery cutting through rock and earth. The massive engineering project reshaped global trade routes and took a decade to complete. Children play baseball behind tenement buildings in Washington, D.C. in 1948. The U.S. Capitol is visible in the background, highlighting the cityscape beyond the neighborhood. Sahrawi women hold rifles during the early days of the Western Sahara War in May 1976. The photograph captures their role in the conflict and the struggle for independence. Civil War veterans examine modern firearms on Veterans Day at the Minnesota State Fair in St. Paul, 1940. The display includes belt-fed machine guns and rifles, highlighting technological changes since their service. The home of Mr. Blind Tom Foley, his wife, and son at Madison Avenue and 77th Street in New York, photographed on May 11, 1891. The building is a small wooden structure surrounded by larger apartment buildings. Marilyn Monroe sits on a chair on the set of The 7-Year Itch during a break between takes in 1954. The photograph captures her in costume on the film set. French paratroopers attempt to disperse Algerian independence demonstrators in Algiers in 1960. The protests erupted during Charles de Gaulle's visit, showing widespread nationalist sentiment despite French military control. Albanians play pool using an AK-47 as a cue during the Albanian Civil War in 1997. The photograph highlights the prevalence of firearms among civilians during the conflict. A U.S. Navy HSS-1 Seabat helicopter hovers over the Soviet submarine B-59, which was forced to surface by U.S. naval forces near Cuba on October 28 to 29, 1962. The incident occurred during the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the tensest moments of the Cold War. Armed Samoan fighters loyal to Chief Mataafa stand ready for a looting expedition during the Second Samoan Civil War in 1899. The men carry traditional weapons and drums as part of their combat gear. Soviet tanks advance past the heavily damaged Reichstag in Berlin on May 4, 1945. The image shows the final phase of the Third Reich as German forces surrender in the Netherlands, Northwest Germany, and Denmark, and Soviet troops occupy the capital. Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space on May 5, 1961, aboard the Mercury Redstone 3 spacecraft. The mission, Freedom 7, followed successful chimpanzee tests and lasted 15 minutes, reaching a suborbital altitude of 187.5 kilometers. Workers decorate a street for Christmas in Canada during the 1930s. They use ladders mounted on a truck to hang garlands above the road. Soviet tanks moved through the streets of Berlin during the city's liberation in May 1945. The image shows destroyed buildings and rubble as German forces collapse at the end of World War II in Europe. A West German scientist places fresh milk into a radioactive detector at Munich's Society of Radiation Research on May 2, 1986. The test measures radiation levels in the milk following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Soviet farmers plow a field with a tractor displaying a portrait of Joseph Stalin. The photograph illustrates the cult of personality imposed on agricultural workers during Stalin's rule in the Soviet Union. A young American boy tests radioactive samples from a chemistry set using a Geiger counter with headphones in 1950. The experiment demonstrates the post-war availability of radioactive materials in educational toys. Workers assemble rangefinder cameras on a production line at the Kyiv Arsenal factory in 1973. The photograph shows multiple employees handling camera components under industrial lighting. Residents walk through deep snow in Bangor, Maine, after a major snowstorm in 1962. Vehicles are almost completely buried, showing the storm's severity. 3 Hitler Youth boys are captured near Berlin in April 1945 as Allied forces close in on the city. They are armed and wearing uniform elements, indicating their involvement in the final defensive efforts of Nazi Germany. Vice President Charles Curtis, the first and only Native American U.S. Vice President, receives a peace pipe from Red Tomahawk, a Lakota man known for killing Sitting Bull in 1929. The Soviet TB-3M-34 bomber, number 2236, lands at the Vienna airfield in 1934. The plane attracts crowds of workers because the airfield is located in the middle of residential working-class neighborhoods. Soviet soldiers fire a salute over the coffins of tank crews killed fighting Nazi forces in Germany, April 1945. The soldiers died just days before the end of World War II in Europe. An automatic beer and sandwich bar opens in Krakow, Poland, on May 22, 1931. The machines dispense drinks and food plates without direct staff service. ACH-47 Chinook helicopter lifts a downed Mi-25 helicopter during a recovery operation in Chad, Africa, on June 10 to 11, 1988. The mission involves transporting the damaged aircraft from the desert to a secure location. A doctor wears full protective clothing during a plague outbreak in Manchuria, China, around 1912. The suit includes a face mask, goggles, and padded outer layers to prevent infection. Lines of laundry hang between apartment buildings on 138th and 139th Streets in the Bronx, New York, photographed by Russell Lee in November 1936. Children play in the dirt alley beneath the drying clothes, showing everyday life in a dense urban neighborhood. Sean Connery rides a 3-wheeled vehicle in the 1971 film Diamonds Are Forever. His on-screen appearance contributed to the rise in popularity of 3-wheelers during the 1970s. West African soldiers of the Free French Army hold rifles following a tactical victory against Italian forces in 1941. The troops are part of colonial units deployed in North Africa during World War II. Australian troops advance on Japanese defenses at Buna, Papua New Guinea, in December 1942. A tank provides fire support through dense jungle terrain. Crew prepares for filming The Diamond Arm in 1968, one of the most iconic Soviet comedies directed by Leonid Gaidai. The movie became a cultural phenomenon, known for its stunts, timing, and massive box office success across the USSR. An SB-2C5 Helldiver from Attack Squadron 34 crashes into the arresting wires on the flight deck of USS Kearsarge, CV-33. The aircraft sustained major damage during carrier landing operations, highlighting the hazards of naval aviation in the mid-20th century. Apollo 16. Lunar Module pilot Charlie Duke collects rock samples from house rock on the rim of North Ray Crater during the mission's final EVA. The photograph shows Duke using a cuff checklist to document lunar geology in detail. Soviet IS-2 heavy tanks advance near the Brandenburg Gate after Berlin's fall in May 1945. The Battle of Berlin ended with General Helmuth Weidling's surrender on May 2nd, marking the collapse of Nazi Germany's capital defenses. Japanese soldiers prepare food in field kitchens during the Bataan Campaign, 1942. Mobile boilers and large pots allowed the Army to cook hundreds of meals per hour, while rations included rice, barley, meat or fish, and condiments. A woman demonstrates a General Electric car charging station circa 1912. Early electric vehicles relied on such stations, which were rare and limited in range, highlighting the infancy of EV infrastructure in the United States. A 1937 photograph shows a young girl in a sparsely furnished farmhouse in Williston, North Dakota. The image documents the living conditions of rural farming families during the Dust Bowl era, highlighting economic hardship and isolation. An 1890s photograph by Jacob Riis shows immigrant children and women working in a cramped New York City tenement. Riis's images exposed harsh living and working conditions directly influencing social reform. Workers climb a 320-foot rope ladder to access the Oregon Trunk Bridge over the Crooked River, Central Oregon, circa 1905 to 1910. The bridge's construction involved extreme height and risk, with minimal safety measures for laborers. Miners climb steep ladders carrying heavy sacks at Serra Pelada, Brazil, 1986. At its peak in 1983, around 100,000 people worked in the open-pit gold mine. Official figures report 44.5 tons of gold extracted from 1980 to 1986. U.S. ensign Arden Rector Ives unbuckles his harness to escape his burning F-6F-5. Hellcat after a landing accident on USS Lexington, February 25, 1945. He was killed in action 3 weeks later, on March 18, 1945. Berlin Barbershop offers haircuts for about 16 cents and shaves for about 6 cents, specifically for the unemployed, in 1927. This reflects the severe post-WWI economic hardship affecting large segments of the population, despite the rise of a wealthy and growing middle class. The steering wheel of the 1972 Maserati Boomerang, designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, is part of a futuristic concept car that never went into production. In 1912, Germany, a pioneering airmail flight, involved manually loading bags of mail into an early monoplane. This method was part of the experimental phase of airmail, which relied on lightweight aircraft with minimal cargo capacity. Around 1915, during the World War I, Austro-Hungarian soldiers used trees to elevate machine guns for improved line of sight over enemy positions. This photo captures the improvisation and tactical adaptation common on the Eastern and Balkan fronts. During World War I, the Women's Royal Naval Service, WRNS, trained female ratings in rifle handling at Crystal Palace, London. Founded in November 1917 with 3,000 members, the WRNS eventually doubled in size, assigning women to over 100 roles, including communications. The Dynasphere, patented in 1930 by John Archibald Purvis, was a single-wheel vehicle from the UK. It could carry passengers inside the wheel, steered by tilting, and was an early experimental attempt at personal transportation. A wounded Japanese soldier is held by U.S. Marines on Betio, Tarawa Atoll, November 1943. This occurred during the Battle of Tarawa, one of the first heavily fortified Pacific islands targeted in amphibious assaults, where Marines faced intense resistance even after initial landings. Soviet students study outdoors on a bench and the ground, using chalk to work out equations before exams, 1960s. This reflects the high academic pressure and resourcefulness of students during that era. Chilean mill in northern Mexico, early 1870s. This Arrastra variant uses a heavy cast iron rolling stone, representing an unusually durable and efficient design for ore grinding at that time. East German soldiers construct the Berlin Wall in 1961, while a West Berlin police officer monitors the area, marking the immediate start of the city's division and the Cold War boundary enforcement. Allied troops prepare a land mattress multiple rocket launcher in 1944 to 45. This British-Canadian weapon could fire dozens of 3-inch rockets in quick succession, delivering massive area bombardment during late-war operations in Northwest Europe. U.S. 8th Army soldiers fire an M115 203mm howitzer during the Korean War on August 13, 1952. The M115 could deliver heavy, high-explosive shells over 12 kilometers, providing crucial long-range artillery support for frontline troops. German soldier inside the barrel of a Paris gun, May 1, 1918. The Paris gun could fire 106-kilogram shells over 130 kilometers, reaching 39 kilometers altitude into the stratosphere. But its low explosive yield caused limited physical damage. British Centurion tank overturns during mobility trials at Bovington, 1951. The trials tested the tank's off-road performance and suspension limits to improve stability and combat maneuverability. Carl Zeiss factory in Jena, East Germany, 1950s. Workers assemble rangefinder cameras during the post-war period when the factory was rebuilding production under Soviet control. Crew of the 1975 Apollo-Soyuz test project trains in Star City, USSR. Soviet cosmonauts Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov prepare alongside American astronauts Thomas Stafford, Vance Brand, and Donald Deke Slayton for the historic joint docking mission. Soviet battleship Novorossiysk, formerly the Italian Giulio Cesare, is dismantled in Kozacha Bay, Sevastopol, Black Sea, between 1957 and 1959. The ship had been sunk by a mysterious explosion in 1955 before being raised for scrapping. East African soldiers of the King's African Rifles relax after a successful advance during the East African Campaign, 1941. This British colonial unit played a key role in defeating Italian forces in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea during World War II. A young German Army officer poses with Jesse Owens and fellow American track athletes at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Owens won 4 gold medals at these games, directly challenging Nazi racial ideology. Young Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth II, is pictured playing with her dog in 1942 during the height of World War II when she was 16 years old. A historic building in Moscow is being relocated in 1979. The structure was carefully moved on rails to make way for urban development, a rare engineering feat for the time. Jim Carrey on the set of The Truman Show, 1997. He negotiated with director Peter Weir to prevent anyone on set from referencing his previous comedic roles, aiming to establish credibility in a dramatic performance. A damaged German steel helmet lies in front of the Reichstag in Berlin, 1946. The wreckage around the building reflects the immense destruction left in the aftermath of World War II's final battles in the city. German soldiers carry the coffin of Napoleon II, the only legitimate son of Napoleon Bonaparte, in Paris, December 1940. The transfer of his remains occurred during the German occupation of France. In Moscow in 1966, the monument to the conquerors of space rises behind small wooden homes like a rocket trail from another world. The titanium obelisk is 107 meters tall, making this photo a rare contrast between old village streets and the Soviet space age. In the 1950s, a Porsche 356 was being loaded into a Delta airplane, showing that even sports cars could travel by air in the early jet age. The Porsche 356 was Porsche's first production model, introduced in 1948, and photos like this reveal how fast premium car delivery was becoming a reality. In 1910, a drink seller in New York's Syrian Quarter carried a metal dispenser on his back to serve cold refreshments on the street. Little Syria in Lower Manhattan was one of the first major Arab-American neighborhoods in the United States before the area was later cleared for new construction. German troops stop a Soviet GAZ-AA truck on Artem Street in Mariupol, October 8, 1941. The truck was still usable, giving the Germans both transport and military supplies in one sudden roadside mistake. A Vietnamese airborne marksman watches from cover near Pu No Quan on October 4, 1953. Operation Moet took place at the edge of the Red River Delta during the First Indochina War. A Soviet road worker drives a heavy asphalt roller in 1961. The wide steel drum pressed fresh road surface flat before modern compactors became common. Italy's King Victor Emmanuel III aims a rifle at an Austrian aircraft between 1915 and 1918. The photo is unusual because the monarch himself is shown taking part near the front during the First World War. Baby mammoth Dima was found in Magadan region in 1977, still preserved in frozen ground. Scientists studied its skin, trunk, and stomach contents, making it one of the most famous Ice Age finds. The British frigate Antelope went down near the Falkland Islands on May 24, 1982, after an Argentine airdrop device went off during disposal work. The Type 21 ship broke apart overnight, creating one of the most famous naval photos of the Falklands conflict. Two bandaged British tank crewmen share a light after leaving their armored vehicle. The photo is remembered for its strange calm, covered faces, military uniforms, and one small everyday gesture. A research plane landed safely after flying over an isolated Amazon group with dozens of arrows stuck in its body. Uncontacted communities can face major health risks from outsiders because common illnesses may be new to them. An imposter ship doctor once performed emergency operations after reading a surgery textbook in his cabin. During the Korean War, 16 badly injured men were treated, and every one of them survived. Finnish field artillery soldiers' test captured rubber gear for crossing shallow lakes in autumn 1941. The meter-long shoes spread weight on soft lake beds, making the strange walking on water idea partly practical. Finnish soldiers surround a dugout in 1941 while sending a Soviet Red Army man to speak with his commander. The scene shows a tense winter war tactic: persuasion before entering a fortified shelter. From Rector Street and Broadway, a photographer captured the second plane approaching the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. The shot was taken from a window with a medium-format camera, seconds before one of the most documented moments in modern history. In China in 1935, authorities publicly punished men accused of illegal opium trade. The photo shows how anti-opium campaigns used public scenes as a warning before radio, and newspapers reached everyone. Jose Mefre reached 204.73 kilometers per hour on this bicycle in 1962. It used one giant gear and had to be paced behind a vehicle to cut air resistance. On October 19, 1950, United States and South Korean forces entered Pyongyang during the Korean War. South Korea and its allies held the city only briefly before Chinese forces joined the conflict and changed the front line. Onabu geisha were women from samurai families trained with the naginata, bow, and jujutsu in old Japan. The long naginata helped them protect the home when male relatives were away on duty. A woman pours water over herself during a morning ritual in Iran, 1999. The domed building and dry hills show a quiet rooftop scene shaped by heat, stone, and daily tradition. A Soviet tank pushes through an empty tram used as a street barricade in Prague, August 1968. Residents used trams and buses to slow the advance toward key city points, including an ammunition depot. In 1982, Larry Walters lifted a lawn chair over Los Angeles using weather balloons. He reached almost 5 kilometers high, then landed safely and became a legend of backyard aviation. Yuri Gagarin was welcomed by huge crowds in London in July 1961. He came by invitation of British foundry workers because before spaceflight he had trained as a foundryman. A timber rafter guides linked logs downriver before roads, and trucks made this work rare. He had to read the current while standing on wet-moving timber with almost no safety gear. Mongolian wrestlers pose at an Independence Day festival in Ulaanbaatar, 1958. In Mongolian wrestling, there are no weight classes, and the open-chested jacket proves the fighter is male by tradition. In 1991, outsiders made a rare peaceful contact with the Sentinelese near North Sentinel Island. The visitors handed over coconuts, and later visits were stopped to protect the islanders' isolation and health. In 1924, the USS Los Angeles airship rose through fog while people below looked like shadows from another world. In 1928, the same giant successfully landed on the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga, a rare test for airship aviation. Sergeant Stubby was a World War I dog who served for 18 months and became famous for warning soldiers before danger reached them. He joined 17 battles and later became one of the most decorated dogs in American history. In 1968, Soviet mailwomen carried newspapers, letters, and subscriptions that connected huge parts of the country before the internet existed. Their heavy bags held daily news, private messages, and the small paper trail of everyday Soviet life. In 1959, Luna 2 became the first human-made object to reach the moon, turning this small metal probe into a giant symbol of the space age. It carried Soviet pennants, and one copy was later given to President Eisenhower during Nikita Khrushchev's visit to the United States. In 1908, crowds in Berlin watched balloon crews prepare for the Gordon Bennett Cup, a race won by flying the farthest without landing. The contest was started by newspaper millionaire Gordon Bennett, not by a pilot. In 1954, Bob Smith and Mary Beth Sanger held their wedding underwater in Texas, in the same place where they first met. Their clothes were weighted so they could stand still, and the groom's suit was shaped with waxed cardboard. This portrait shows a jeweler and moneylender in Kamianets-Podilsky around the 1870s or 1880s. The tiny object in his hand and the scale beside him turn a simple studio photo into a close look at old trade and trust. In October 1937, a formal ceremony took place at Rome's Victor Emmanuel II Monument for Italian volunteers from the Spanish conflict. The mix of uniforms, foreign guests, and staged grandeur shows how politics turned public memory into theater. In October 1938, King Victor Emmanuel III reviewed Italian volunteers in Naples after their service on Franco's side in Spain. The photo captures a carefully staged moment where monarchy, army, and politics stood together in public view. In 1942, Italy's king and queen met Red Cross nurses aboard a ship carrying people evacuated from Italian East Africa. The white uniforms and formal greetings hide the tense reality of a fading colonial empire. In May 1941, British troops found a stone carving of Mussolini near an Italian ammunition dump in East Africa. Lying beside stacked crates, the fallen monument made propaganda look suddenly small. In the mid-1940s, snake handler Frank Kiefer performed with the Seabrand Brothers Carnival in Idaho Falls, Idaho. The photo feels unreal because he is calmly holding a living mass of snakes like part of his costume. Celesta Herrmann became a singer, beauty advisor, manicurist, impersonator, and sideshow performer after her husband lost his job. Later, she turned a major health crisis into a book and became known for her warm smile and unusual life story. In 1944, Royal Navy Corsairs warmed up on the flight deck of HMS Illustrious while crews prepared for a long Indian Ocean mission. Nearby, USS Saratoga was working with the British fleet, making this photo a rare glimpse of two navies moving as one. In 1995, a new viewing platform at Cave Creek in New Zealand gave way during a student field trip. The tragedy led to major changes in how public structures were checked and managed in national parks. In 1879, British officers posed in Kabul during the Second Anglo-Afghan campaign. The numbered heads suggest this was not just a group portrait, but a careful record of every man in the scene. In 1913, an unnamed Siksika Nation man in Alberta stood smiling outside a tent with a cigarette in hand. The image feels striking because it shows an ordinary, relaxed moment inside a history often photographed through outsiders' labels. In the early 1950s, women in Saint-Urbain, Quebec, baked bread for sale in an outdoor oven while snow covered the ground. The rows of loaves cooling in winter air show how daily work could look almost impossible and still feel ordinary. In 1974, a group of rude boys gathered outside a record shop in Notting Hill, London. Their suits, hats, and calm faces capture a street style that carried music, attitude, and identity. In the late 1970s, this actor couple shared a short but deeply remembered relationship. Their story became especially moving because their time together ended after a serious illness in 1978. In 1984, Afghan fighters in Jaji, Paktia, posed with 2 artillery pieces taken during the Soviet-Afghan conflict. The quiet mountain road makes the scene feel like a rare pause in a much larger struggle. In 1983, 2 famous Indian film stars turned chief ministers met after moving from cinema into politics. The photo captures a rare moment when screen fame and political power sat side by side. In 2003, huge crowds filled Tbilisi during Georgia's Rose Revolution, a movement named after the flowers carried by protesters. The image shows the scale of a public moment that helped change the country's political direction without looking like an ordinary rally. This portrait shows a former military police officer who later rose from private to major general in South Korea's army in less than a decade. His rapid rise ended in 1956, making the calm studio image feel like the beginning of a much darker political story. In the 1890s, this Welsh strongwoman became famous for turning raw physical power into stage entertainment. Her Tomb of Hercules act helped make female strength look shocking, elegant, and impossible for its time. In 1942, a Japanese Navy guard stood beside a pile of captured American equipment in the Philippines. The messy heap of helmets, wheels, and gear shows how quickly a battlefield can turn into a warehouse of lost plans. In 1907, Annette Kellerman promoted a fitted one-piece swimsuit when women were still expected to swim in heavy clothing. Her simple bathing suit became so controversial that it helped turn beachwear into a fight for personal freedom. In 1937, a homesteader's wife in Williams County, North Dakota, read a magazine inside a plain wooden home lined with old newspapers. The scene turns a quiet moment into a sharp reminder that even remote, hard lives still made room for stories and escape. In 1942, Polish soldiers adopted a Syrian brown bear named Wojtek, and he later became an official member of their unit. At Monte Cassino, he became famous for helping carry heavy supply crates. In 1942, Japanese soldiers on the Bataan campaign filled bamboo canisters with water in a rough jungle area. The photo shows how survival often depended on simple tools as much as weapons. One of the earliest photos of Machu Picchu shows the Inca city still covered by thick mountain growth before restoration changed its face. In 1911, Hiram Bingham brought the site to world attention, but local people already knew it was there. Around 1858, this photo captured the daughters of Japanese feudal lord Shimazu Nariakira in traditional dress. It is considered one of the earliest surviving photographs taken in Japan, making the quiet portrait feel like a doorway into another century. In 1898, a future American president posed on horseback in his Rough Rider uniform during the Spanish-American War. The calm photo hides the fact that this military image later became a powerful part of his political legend. Around 1956, this photo shows a young actress drinking Coca-Cola through a straw at a soda shop. The image was taken years before her best-known television role premiered in 1964. This photo shows Queen Elizabeth II inspecting an honor guard during a Commonwealth visit. She reigned from 1952 to 2022 and served as head of the Commonwealth while many former British colonies became independent states. In 1949, photographer Toshinori Tanuma photographed two dancers on a rooftop in Asakusa, Tokyo. Behind them are a cemetery and dense city buildings, while their stage costumes and large hair ribbons show they were performers. In August 1968, Prague residents crowded around a Soviet tank during the Warsaw Pact military entry into Czechoslovakia. The event stopped the Prague Spring reforms, and Czechoslovakia remained under Moscow-aligned rule until 1989. At Expo 1967 in Montreal, the Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada Pavilion presented Caribbean culture beside the water. Performers sat on a floating stage in front of the pavilion, while visitors watched from two levels. In October 1935, Ben Shahn photographed sharecropper families in Little Rock, Arkansas, as part of his documentary work during the Great Depression. A print of this image later sold for $38,100. Soviet troops entered Lithuania in June 1940 after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact placed the country in Moscow's sphere. Lithuania was annexed into the Soviet Union after controlled elections, and the first mass deportations followed in June 1941. In 1942, Finnish troops were photographed in a trench on the Leningrad front during the siege of the city. Finland fought the Soviet Union alongside Germany from 1941 to 1944, and the siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. In 1995, Sweden tested the Russian Mil-Me-28A against the American H-64A during an attack helicopter evaluation program. This photo shows the Mi-28A beside a Swedish STRV-121, Sweden's version of the Leopard 2A4 tank. On September 3, 1940, Londoners boarded a Thames steamer near Westminster to travel across the city. 4 days later, London entered the long air raid period known as the Blitz. Between 1929 and 1941, Soviet authorities closed thousands of mosques across the country during a major anti-religious campaign. In Tatarstan alone, more than 10,000 of about 12,000 mosques were reportedly shut by 1930. Kyiv radiologist Leonid Kinzelsky treated many Chernobyl responders at the Kyiv Institute of Radiology after the 1986 disaster. Accounts from the institute say about 191 people were admitted, while many medical records were later taken as secret documents. This image shows apartment blocks in Pripyat, Ukraine, a city built for workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Pripyat was evacuated after the April 1986 reactor accident, and its high-rise buildings still stand inside the exclusion zone. In 1903, passengers rode a small covered boat on the pond in Central Park, New York. The boat was photographed near the Arch Bridge, one of the park's early scenic crossing points. In 1895, this photo was taken in Patna, India, showing people gathered beside a carved stone post and water vessels. Patna was a major city on the Ganges, and photographs from this period recorded daily life under British colonial rule. In 1895, this photo was taken in Patna, India, showing people gathered beside a carved stone post and water vessels. Patna was a major city on the Ganges, and photographs from this period recorded daily life under British colonial rule. In May 1946, this former German finance official testified during the Nuremberg tribunal. The court later acquitted him, stating that the evidence did not prove criminal intent under the charges brought against him. In September 1944, a local policeman working for the Australian government was photographed at Cape Gloucester on New Britain. He is holding an Owen submachine gun, an Australian-made firearm used widely by Allied forces in the Pacific. On May 27, 1941, the German battleship Bismarck was photographed in the distance during its final battle with Royal Navy ships. The chase began after Bismarck sank HMS Hood 3 days earlier in the Denmark Strait. Ellis Island opened as a federal immigration station in New York Harbor on January 1, 1892. From 1892 to 1954, more than 12 million immigrants were processed there before entering the United States. During the Second World War, two United States soldiers examined a German propaganda message painted on a wall beside an American tank. The word Tommy was British slang for a British soldier, so the message tried to divide Allied troops. In the 1890s, this street in Lead, South Dakota, included the Ewan Lee Laundry and the Anderson Blacksmith Shop. Horse-drawn wagons, muddy roads, and laundry businesses were common in western mining towns before cars became widespread. Elaz Dervishevich was born in 1901 in Bijeljina and became known as one of the youngest soldiers in the Austro-Hungarian army. During the First World War, he served near the Isonzo front and was promoted to corporal while still a teenager. In 1992, Danish aid worker Helga Meyer used a modified 1979 Chevrolet Camaro to deliver supplies in Bosnia. His armored car became known as the Ghost Camaro and reportedly carried several tons of aid through dangerous roads. Tish Murtha photographed working-class children in northeast England during the 1970s and 1980s. Her documentary work focused on everyday life, unemployment, and social conditions in communities often left out of official stories. In 1908, girls near Amsterdam posed in traditional Dutch clothing with white caps, aprons, and long skirts. Their wooden clogs were not costume props because this type of footwear was still used in daily life in rural Netherlands. In February 1978, an Ethiopian soldier posed with a poster about Ethiopia and the Soviet Union fighting Somalia's invasion. The image belongs to the Ogaden War, when Soviet support shifted from Somalia to Ethiopia. Karl Panzram was an American repeat offender whose prison photo became one of the most widely shared criminal portraits of the early 20th century. In 1920, he robbed the home of former United States President William Howard Taft and later wrote a memoir with prison guard Henry Lesser. Cordell Jackson founded Moon Records in Memphis in 1956 and released her own rock and rockabilly recordings. In the 1990s, she gained new attention by performing guitar on television while already in her 70s. In 1951, W. Eugene Smith photographed rural Spain for a Life magazine essay later known as Spanish Village. His photos in De La Tosa, Extremadura, documented daily life under Franco's rule, including ruined walls and political slogans. On October 29, 1948, Israeli forces entered the Palestinian village of Safsaf during the 1948 war. Historical accounts report dozens of civilian deaths there, and Yosef Namani later criticized the events in his diary. In 1930, a Palestinian family was photographed reading on a balcony in Haifa. At that time, Haifa was a major port city in British Mandate Palestine, with growing trade around its harbor. In 1979, an Afghan Mujahideen fighter was photographed holding a 7.62 mm PPSH submachine gun. The PPSH was a Soviet World War II design, and old examples were still used in Afghanistan decades later. The printed caption says, "Volga, loading barges, number 6, showing cargo work on the Volga River. Workers carry heavy sacks across narrow wooden gangways from the shore to the riverboats." In 1932, two Presbyterian missionaries posed with members of the Tuho tribe in Ruatahuna, New Zealand. Several people wear traditional cloaks, and the tribal chief is seated at the center of the group. In 1961, Argentina's president attended a public tribute to a former provisional president and general. The ceremony included military officers, naval uniforms, and a large official crowd. In 1915, Catherine Wright sat with her brother Orville Wright in a new Wright Model HS airplane. Catherine helped manage the Wright brothers' business and public affairs after their early flights made them famous. On June 30, 1918, a New Zealand politician smoked a cigar with a Maori soldier of the Pioneer Battalion in France. The photo was taken by official war photographer Henry Armitage Sanders during the First World War. In 1902, this photo showed infant Michinomiya Hirohito holding a small Japanese rising sun flag. He became Emperor of Japan in 1926 and remained on the throne until 1989. On February 23, 1945, United States Navy patrol torpedo boats 358 and 374 entered Manila Bay for the first time since 1942. They found many Japanese ships lying on the bay floor after carrier strikes in late 1944. In April 1988, Iraqi soldiers posed beside a bullet marked mural of Ayatollah Khomeini on the Fa Peninsula. The photo was taken during the Iran-Iraq War, shortly after Iraq recaptured the area from Iranian forces. I will be very grateful for your subscription to the channel. Every day I try to tell you about such interesting historical photos.